Hi, didn't see you there. When I was in 7th grade and slowly became introduced to nerdy and pretentious music circles, I just kept seeing this one album cover, again and again and again. It was brought up related to the popular music critic Anthony Fantano, as well as just generally on platforms like the hellscape known as Reddit. This album cover was for a record called The Money Store, released in 2012 by experimental Sacramento hip-hop group Death Grips. I can actually specifically remember my first experience listening to the album. It was my lunch period, and I decided, well, might as well give this well-known, critically acclaimed album a shot. Little did I know that album would forever change my musical experience and taste. On my first listen, I didn't quite get it. In fact, I thought the music was just too loud and abrasive and weird. Even though I thought the album was below average, I just kept being compelled to come back. The album was just different from music I had heard before in so many ways, and every time I'd listen to it again, I felt a little bit better about it. So fast forward to now, and this album is definitely one of my favorite albums of all time, for just so many reasons. Once you get used to it, the instrumentals are just hardcore in all the best ways, and their sound design is incredible. Aside from just The Money Store, I grew close with other Death Grips projects such as their debut, Ex-Military, and their 2015 two-parter, The Powers That Be. Also, the lyricism is just impeccable, both as critiques of social structure and as analysis of the human condition in a way I haven't really seen before. Plenty of artists are able to make songs about drugs, but none of them are able to dissect their use in society, as well as on a personal level, as well as the Fever AA off of The Money Store. Plenty of artists discuss running from the police or not liking the police, but Clink off of Ex-Military discusses the horror of police violence while also being backed by a phenomenal instrumental. Somehow, most of the songs Death Grips have made about social, economic, and political issues still hit the same spot as they did when they were released. And let me remind you, the songs and albums I've mentioned so far have all been released in the early to mid-2010s. How does Death Grips provide a critique of a system that, even while that system's methods might change and the social structure around them might change, still makes sense and are impactful? Let's just take a look at the politics of the group. In many interviews, members of the band have expressed a wish for all content to be freely available online, with an emphasis put on the use of physical media. That way we can keep that side of the culture alive. Andy Morin.
Hi, this is me, Editing Aspen. So, it turns out Andy Morin might not be involved in further Death Grips projects, as he has not been credited on any posts relating to the new album they recently announced they were working on. He also might have done some weird and exploitative and creepy stuff, and I've linked a Reddit post about that in the description. So yeah, I don't support Andy Morin, and if this is true, he is a massive tool. So keep that in mind going forward. He's just one of the few band members who have actually done, like this interview is really helpful to their philosophy. I do not support Andy Morin. Just wanted to let y'all know.
A member of the band, who is commonly known as Flatlander, once said in an interview that,
"We welcome a situation in the future where all digital information is free for the people, but where all physical releases are also available to purchase for the people that are into the material aspects of owning the record or are rooted in the record store culture."
This element of their philosophy comes through in the fact that all of their music is released freely on their website, thirdworlds.net. They also have had issues with getting their samples cleared or approved by the musician who originally created them. This led to the mixtape Ex-Military being removed from streaming services. Luckily, it's still on their website for free. Overall, Death Grips practice what they preach when it comes to this concept and many others. They are also known for using symbolism in a very interesting way, such as their frontman, Stephen
Burnett,
also known as Ride or MC Ride's occult tattoos. They frequently use metaphors related to occult imagery, such as in the song On GP. Trigger warning here, I'm about to talk about suicide. That song is one of their best, in my opinion, and is consistently referred to in their fandom as the best song, period.
Last night, 3:30 in the morning, that's on my front. Boys can feel it. Itching to get me with the mail. That's what you waiting for. Like a question. No one mentioned he turns around. Has me as well, and he slurs. Is that your own discretion? It's been a pleasure. Shut it.
This song is gut-wrenching. And that last lyric is one of the few examples that I could find where Ride uses his real name and not his stage name. It's awful to see a man completely full of anger and sadness contemplating how to end his own life. It's sad to see as a person with experiences of my own that heavily relate to this song. This also shows their heavy use of the occult, including the image of death as a being or a god, even one that isn't necessarily evil. This song also literally just uses the word occult in its lyrics. I just kind of wanted to show you those. Listen to Death Grips. The use of this culture that is usually just shunned and associated with evil shows a general Death Grips pattern of behavior. They often represent the outcasts, the people disregarded by the system that tells us anyone can win, when really the game is rigged. Aside from just the occult messaging, it's the fact that Ride is discussing this widely trivialized topic of suicidal ideation and suicide in general. He discusses his life as a repeated, tired struggle. He's fucking tired of all the perks. He's tried nothing, everything works. This last line, I think, is especially fascinating because it doesn't really make sense until you actually start to work on some analyzing. He's stuck in this space of everything being good, and yet he can't help but feel miserable. He's tried just sitting by and doing nothing with his life, and even though everyone says that he should be happy now, he doesn't care about all the perks of living. He just wants to die in peace. On the cover of the Money Store is what is described by the band as an androgynous masochist on the leash of a feminist sadist who's smoking. The sadist has carved death grips into her bitch's chest. There's an overly confident quality of the woman smoking and a calmness to the androgynous masochist. Both of the characters on this album express traits that are often cast aside. They both fall into sexual communities often seen as strange or deviant and disgusting. The character on the left also portrays androgyny. I wouldn't know anything about that concept. This character defies gender norms as well as the expectation of normal sexual activity. These characters are also described as feminists, which I found to be interesting considering how most hip-hop critics will often say that all of it's misogynistic, thug garbage. I will not deny the history of objectification and misogyny within hip-hop, but most of these critics usually portray it as most hip-hop. It is a problem, but this is also true for most music genres, including the ones typically seen as more white. Misogyny is not the product of hip-hop, but hip-hop is a mirror of a misogynistic culture, a culture that comes along with most American music. Adding on to this feminist point, Death Grips rarely uses women as a status symbol or uses them as objects. They do have reference to sexual acts in their music, but none of these references I could find even specify that they're being done with a woman. For us bisexual, even if the reasoning behind this is not intended as feminist, I still think it's interesting. It could just be that Death Grips tends to focus on systems and how they experience them than it focuses on individuals and individual action. The characters are also described as calm and confident, which gives a certain power to those identities. Our culture often becomes obsessed with the dysphoric elements of queer, specifically trans individuals, giving them an identity of pathetic tragedy. However, as placing these characters as not caring about how others perceive them, even finding confidence and peace in their identities, it serves as radical optimism to directly combat perceptions based on propaganda. How Death Grips places these characters at the forefront of the album gives a very in-your-face image. If you're the type of person to clutch your pearls at an album cover, you're the exact type of person they don't want listening to their music. This is also the case with their album No Love Deep Web, which has an album cover of one of the members' The explanation for this has not been completely confirmed by the band, but I think there are some interpretations that make a lot of sense. In a quote from Griffin Karkowski,
Choosing something like this to represent an entire album isn't out of place when put into perspective with the lyrical content of the group's music, which often contains messages of sexual liberation, anti-establishmentarianism, and more or less all things ugly truth. There's something undoubtedly satisfying about the idea of releasing an album and forcing other people to censor it for you.
Had to give a shout out to this article. Solid use of anti-establishmentarianism. Look, you can't blame me. I'm not gonna learn how to pronounce. This album cover is a perfect example of Death Grips doing the polar opposite of the mainstream, expressing their beliefs in ways that many would say are just too much. This album also caused them to get dropped by their label, mostly because Death Grips leaked the album on BitTorrent early. It would be too little, though, to base a perception of an entire album off of just the cover for both The Money Store and No Love Deep Web. I mean, I think there's some saying about books and covers that says this very thing. One great example of the timeless nature of Death Grips comes in their most popular song, I've Seen Footage. This song is clearly depicting what happens when you give all of us unrestricted access to the horrors that have been happening this whole time. Specifically, the lyrics of this song recall images of countless videos of police brutality targeting specifically black victims. This definitely rings true in modern-day America, where you have plenty of people being killed every day by ICE agents. This can be interpreted as depicting the apathy we gain from viewing rampant, uncontrolled violence and oppression. You get the image of a grainy cell phone video shaking in the hand of an innocent bystander. To me, this song reminds me of a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests of just a few years ago. However, this song was released in 2011. Death Grips were very aware of the harm that the internet can cause, but also how much good it can do. After all, we can now share information incredibly easily in America, allowing information on injustice. It is very, very easy to educate yourself now, to the point that on the very device that I used to write this essay, I could read thousands of peer-reviewed studies, I could produce an entire song, I could listen to Death Grips, or I could just play Fallout New Vegas for the third time. I would say that's a pretty good thing, and it's given idiots like me space to think they understand how the world works just because they watch ContraPoints and have read a handful of papers. We have the capability to do incredible harm to our mental health, but we are also capable of educating ourselves in mere seconds with the devices that we have in our pockets. That's the core of I've Seen Footage to me, but it's up to interpretation. I highly suggest you listen to it yourself and find your own meaning. Overall, Death Grips are a very interesting case, and their music is some of the most interesting stuff I've listened to. But how has it remained so timeless? Under the system we live under, yes, we're at that level of annoying analysis, people often feel like there's no way to get anything to change. It was shown in a 2022 study that
of 2,000 people, 67% are not optimistic about seeing changes occur, but they still want to leave a better world for the next generation.
Depending on when this is being viewed, there will be a percentage of you that chuckled when you saw the number 67. Now is not the time. It's easy to feel hopeless when our situation seems to only get worse over time. That's why Death Grips exist, and why their lyrics have aged, unfortunately, well. They don't just look at specific facets of the issues with society, they analyze the feelings rooted in those systems. The response to any kind of abuse of power can be channeled through their lyrics. In the face of rising fascism, the horrors of everyday life, and the exploitation of countless people around the globe, Death Grips look evil in the eyes and say, fuck that. They promote a leftist approach of radical action to cause change.
While not all leftists may consider themselves socialists, socialism is the dominant ideology of this slice of the political spectrum. Leftists advocate for policies such as universal healthcare, workers' rights, and institutional social justice. They are also anti-capitalist, so the policies they champion would require a serious societal change to achieve.
Why would we sit quietly and protest the way that the people in charge want us to when we could actually respond in a way that causes direct harm to the systems we all take for granted? The band expresses this themselves in the Guillotine music video. The video shows Ride in a car where the outside is static, doing this iconic yelling performance, all while being held tight by a seatbelt made of static. When an interviewer asked Andy Moran why Stefan was wearing his seatbelt in the video, he had this to say.
We obviously had the option and foresight to not use a seatbelt, but that misses the point. It is not real. The outside is static, the inside is static, and the seatbelt is fucking static. Everything is static, just eating away at the individual. The material world and many things within it are designed to keep us half dead, and we're trained to think these things are keeping us safe.
Death Grip sees the seatbelts for what they truly are. Restrictions to keep the general public at bay. I don't think they literally mean that this is what seatbelts do, but with Death Grips you never know. They always make their music from a very raw place, as stated in that previous interview, so of course the music will uproot our fears and how the world is driven by them. The albums, all of them, come from a human angle, which gives each album its signature sound that always goes a different direction but still feels like Death Grips. Death Grips will never die, because they are a direct, unfiltered lens into the human condition. While their individual experiences are, of course, personal, their fear, their anger, their mania, all comes from a place many people can see. Death Grips often say that they make music for the future, but I would say that this isn't the full picture. They make music for people, regardless of the time period. Many artists release music for some imaginary person, or they release music about a fictionalized self. Especially if you are with a label under very strict creative control, many artists will stray away from the more strange or deviant parts of life. We each evolve based on our influences and the culture we live in to become a social symbol. In the words of Death Grips and the song Beware, it's beware.
I close my eyes and seize it. I clench my fists and beat it. I light my torch and burn it. I am the beast I worship.
We close our eyes and attempt to seize some sort of American dream that was never intended to be reachable. While we cannot even picture what we're reaching for, we continue nonetheless. We clench our fists, relentlessly fighting each other, distracted in the way that only serves the interests of the systems we take for granted. When we are separated, we have no chance of dismantling the people and governments that create the exact distractions we kill each other over. We burn away our books, we burn away our history, we burn away all the evidence that just because things are a certain way, that does not make them inevitable. We burn it all, erasing the information that could save us. We all become the beast of our own making, based on some kind of ideal created by our society. We base these beasts off of ideas we worship, those things that are said to keep us safe, but are designed to keep us dead. Death Grips is an embodiment of all of us who are products of an oppressive system. Death Grips is in the business of observing the rules we treat as natural and second nature and exposing the rotten core of their ideologies. As long as we are flawed, and as long as there is exploitation, greed, and tyranny, Death Grips will continue to live on as one of the greatest bands of all time.